Okay, we have the jury coming in.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Now, in some states, he would be in his
Welcome
jail
back. Good
uniform.
afternoon. All right, so as we concluded yesterday, I informed you all that we would begin what's called the sentencing or penalty phase portion of the trial at this point. In the penalty phase portion of the trial, you will hear the penalty range for the offenses for which you convicted, which are murder, tampering with physical evidence, and abuse of a corpse. It is in many ways very similar to the phase where you decide guilty or not guilty. Each side will have an opportunity to make an opening statement if they wish to do so. They may present evidence, and then they make closing arguments as well if they wish to do so. Then, just like before, you will be given instructions by the court as to the sentencing, and then you will retire to deliberate. Is the Commonwealth ready? Yes. Would you like to make an opening statement? Go right ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, on behalf of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, families of Christopher Jones, Morris Gordon, and Mary Lou, we thank you for your time and your attention these past 2 weeks. This portion of the trial will be much shorter. We will recall Ms. Wren, Debbie Wren, the grandmother of the victims, and you will hear from Sean Jones, brother of Christopher Jones, about the effects that these murders had on families. We will also present evidence of the defendant's prior convictions and about the length of the sentences that you can impose, and just a little bit about the parole and incarceration system in Kentucky so that you have more information that you can use when you decide upon these sentences. Now, when you go back there to deliberate, you are allowed to consider all the evidence you have already heard up to this point, the nature of the crimes presented during the past week's testimony, in addition to the new evidence that you will hear today. Thank you very much.
For the defense?
You're doing it right. So yesterday, it was like a long time ago to me actually, but I know it. Yesterday, we talked about whether or not the Commonwealth had met its burden. And that was the last time we talked before you went out and you went to the jury room. And I want you to know that I appreciate the fact that you took time, talked about it together, went through the instructions, thought about it. And I understand that you reached your conclusion. That's your job. You did your job. Now, there's just a few more days. That sounds even worse than it is. Tomorrow. We'll finish tomorrow. And you also may be tired of me. And I'm not going to talk at great length. I know I talked for a little while yesterday. Thought I had a lot more to say. But the result of your deliberations today are not and should not be a foregone conclusion. You may have, when you were back in that room, said, we want to find him guilty, and we already know what we think the penalty should be. You're human beings, right? You may have reached that conclusion. I understand that. That's okay. But as the court just told you, there's more for you to hear. There's going to be evidence from the prosecution. There's going to be live witnesses from the witness stand. There's also evidence that we think that you need to hear. The evidence that we think you need to hear is about Brice. It's about Brice as a person, as a human being. we, all of us, everybody, we are not simply the worst thing that we have ever done. You have reached the conclusion that Brice committed that crime and that the Commonwealth proved that beyond a reasonable doubt, and I accept that. We have to. But that doesn't change the fact that Brice is a human being as well. I'm going to ask you to keep an open mind and listen and decide, because literally what you decide today and tomorrow determines his future. I've spent an awful lot of time getting to know, trying to get to know Brice, not just him, his family, his life, his history, everything about him. That's one of the things that in a case this serious that a lawyer tries to do. Know more about Brice than Brice. I'd love it if I could just sort of open up my brain and pour it out and just tell all of you, but I can't, and I won't, because what you need to do is hear it from the witness stand. But there are some things that I can't tell you. No matter what conclusion you have reached about Brice as a person because of these charges, Brice is a human being. And more importantly, Brice is a person who's had a life that got him to this point. Some of the evidence you hear from this witness stand will talk about what his life has been like to this point. You'll hear that as a child, Brice's life was different than a lot of kids. There's things we take for granted. Right? Many people have tough lives. Brice is one of the people who has had a very tough life. And he also had obstacles that luckily most of us do not have. We'll hear that Brice suffers from an intellectual disability. That's the current term. That's what people use now. When I was growing up, we used the word retarded. I'm not saying that to be harmful to Brice, but I'm saying that to make sure that it's clear. You'll hear expert testimony from this witness stand explaining not only the existence of that disability, but also the effect of that disability. Because these things aren't abstract, they're not just out there. It's not just the existence of something like that, it's how it affects somebody. And not merely how it affects them in the moment, but how it affects them year after year after year. You'll hear that Brice, when other kids were doing well, was doing poorly. That Brice would say over and over, I don't understand, I just don't understand. People can have, things can affect people differently. But in this case, based on the verdict you have reached, I will tell you there is no small sentence. I'm not going to get up here and ask you for a small sentence because it's not even possible. It's not even possible. The smallest sentence, and the judge will instruct you, is 20 years in prison for each count 1, count 2, count 3. That's the smallest amount. So there is not going to be, not me, not somebody else from my team, no one's going to get up here and say that we're now asking you to let Brice out the door or anything like that, because that wouldn't even be in your power. But I am going to ask you to keep an open mind and think about the things in his life that have actually affected him and got him to this room and that chair today. You're going to hear about Brice having several brothers, several sisters. I'm not going to try and go through all of them today because frankly, it would also be names that are difficult to remember, and I'm not trying to be confusing. But you will hear about one of his brothers. And this brother in particular, I think is important. I think it's worth pointing him out because he also had trouble. And Brice and his brother both had difficulties, but there's a big difference between the two. One brother got help, got extra attention, got extra counseling, got extra time, was evaluated, and had parents who followed through with the evaluation. And that brother now is a professor teaching in a college. Brice didn't get any of that help. I wish he had. I'll go so far as to say if he had, I do not think any of us would be in this room. But he didn't. He didn't get the help. Instead of getting the help, there was a custody battle. And the custody battle revolved around control of him and his schooling. And it got bad enough so that he was taken away from the same parents who followed the recommendations and helped the one brother. But instead, Brice got none of that support. He got none of those resources. He didn't get better. You'll also hear that as part of that, at times he was in a household physical punishment. That he suffered some significant trauma because of that. You'll hear that from an expert on this witness stand who will walk you through the effect of trauma. And the effect of trauma is different for different people. I like to think that I'm pretty resilient. But the problem is, if someone is already suffering from an intellectual disability, they don't have that resilience. When trauma hits them, they don't have the skills and the resources to deal with it themselves. Not the same way that one of us might be able to do. It's when you have a kid who suffers the trauma because of his intellectual disability, can't fix himself. The only thing that can fix him is if he has people who love him and care for him and go the extra mile. And you're going to hear that, unfortunately, that didn't happen. I'm not trying to say that the people in Brice's life were terrible parents or evil people, any of that. I have 3 kids. I know it is hard. It is work all the time. But I am going to say that they dropped the ball. And dropping the ball in this case, dropping the ball with Brice, with all the deficits and all the problems and the trauma that he was experiencing, had real lasting effects. Does that excuse everything that you've heard about? No, and I'm not saying it does. I'm saying it's relevant and important in deciding who Brice is as a human being. And that you are allowed, and the judge will read you instructions and say the law allows you to consider those things as well when you decide on a fair punishment. You are allowed, as the Commonwealth said, to consider all the evidence from the first phase. And I think if we told you you weren't allowed to consider it, you would anyway. You're allowed to consider the punishment that was meted out. Mr. Carter, Mr. Taylor. Carter was in prison for 3 years. Mr. Taylor was in prison for 6.5. You're allowed to consider that punishment as well. It's up to you how much that matters. The last thing I want to tell you, it's something that would naturally occur to you, and you've probably already been thinking about, is based on what you do in this courtroom, what happens next? Where does Brice grow? Some of that evidence will be presented to you. We'll answer as many of those questions as we can. One thing you'll also hear from the experts on the stand is that even though Brice is damaged, there is still hope, and he still could be redeemed. That with the right combination of medicine and therapy and treatment, he is someone who could, after serving whatever long sentence you give him, that could have a future. Only Brice can atone. I'm asking you to give him a chance to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Griffiths. Someone would like to call the first witness?
Yes, Your Honor, Commonwealth calls Sean Jones.
Sir, you can come right up here, please. Just watch your step there. Could you please raise your right hand for me? You sort of tell the truth and the whole truth. Thank you. You can have a seat.
Good afternoon, sir. Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
Jury, my name is Sean Lamont Jones. I am the older brother of Christopher Bernard Jones.
Could you tell the jury how this crime has affected your family?
Affected my family a whole lot. You know, my brother, he has 2 sons that, in high school, and they don't have their father. And really, it impacted me more because I felt as an uncle to them. Couldn't take care of them the way their father would take care of them.
How are his sons doing?
Doing good. One's at Manu playing football, one's at Shawnee playing football. It's Christopher Bernard Jones Jr. and Barron Martin.
We heard earlier there's a daughter.
Yes, he has a daughter. He has a granddaughter. They got never meet either. So yeah, it impacted very hardly.
Is there anything else you would like the jury to know?
He was a good man, He didn't deserve that.
I'm sorry, I could not hear you.
My brother was a good man. He didn't deserve for his life to be taken. For him to grow with his sons and his daughter and try to get to know or even get to know his granddaughter, he'll never have that.
How old is the granddaughter?
She is probably 3, maybe.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions. Hold on, the defense might.
Any questions?
Sorry for your loss. I don't have any questions.
You're free to go, sir. Thank you. Thanks, John. Tom would like to call their next witness. Thank you. Hello again, Ms. Ron. Just need to swear you again, please. You swear to tell the truth and the whole truth? Thank you, madam.
Could you reintroduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Deborah Wren, W-R-E-N.
And Ms. Run, how has this crime affected your family?
I can't even begin to tell you how this has been. Nothing is the same. Nothing. We just can't get over it. We cannot. We don't know how to deal with it. It's been 7 years and 7 months. And all the things we used to do, go to the boys' ball games, birthday parties, Christmas, everything. It's just not the same without them. They really were kids.
And ma'am, can you let the jury know who of the boys' family has been with us through this trial?
The
Who-
mother,
or their mother,
yeah.
and who else?
Larry's other grandmother,
Larry's grandmother?
Mhm.
Okay.
and Larry's half sister, Shalara, and just different friends and people like that. It just sounds too hard to go. Was it?
Yeah. And has your husband been here too?
Oh yeah, he
Madam Clerk,
he watches it every day on TV, and he can't be here because he fell and hurt his leg, and he fractured his knee and pulled ligaments in his knee, and he couldn't get up and down. And the jury came in and out, so he had to stay home. And this was the most important part for him. And all he could do is watch it on TV. And then talk to me when we get home. But we'll never be the same. Nothing is the same. I mean, you can still get together with your family, but you miss them because they were so loving and so much fun. And Larry used to help me. Larry used to help me put the Christmas tree up and get ready for Christmas and put the Christmas music. He wanted to listen to Christmas music in October. But sorry. I miss him so much. We all miss him so much every day. When I think about the things they could have done, and Larry and Reese, Larry really had planned on going to Texas Christian College. That's all he talked about, was going to Texas Christian College and playing football. That's all he talked about all the time. And Reese talked about his music. He loved music. But they They were fun. They were fun kids. They are. Now they're gone. 7 years and 7 months.
Thank you, ma'am. I have no further questions.
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
You're free to go, ma'am, or stay as you wish. Next witness.
Oh, of course, Danielle Brown.
Thank you. Could I have you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth? Thank you, Ms. Brown. You can have a seat.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good afternoon. My name is Danielle Brown and I am a paralegal.
And do you work with my office?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
What, relative to this trial, what are your duties?
My duties are to compile the criminal history and compile the certified convictions and things like that.
In this case, did you get certified copies of records for the defendant Brice Rhodes?
Yes, I did.
How do you do that?
I contact the clerk's office for both here and in Indiana, and I got certified and exemplified copies of each of the convictions.
And are there certain identifiers or other means that you use to make sure you're getting the convictions for the right person?
Correct. I searched by name, birth date, social security number, and things like that.
And what is the defendant's date of birth?
His date of birth is September 8th, 1990.
So how old is he now?
He is 33.
Did you find prior criminal convictions in this case?
Yes, I did.
Right. Yeah.
Starting with the earliest conviction, what county did it happen?
It happened in Clark County, Indiana.
Okay, what was the date of the offense?
January 9th, 2009.
And what was the offense?
It is 3 counts of intimidation and 1 count of carrying a handgun without license.
What was the date of the conviction?
February 1st, 2010.
And what was the sentence?
4 years fixed term of imprisonment at the IDOC.
Would that be the Indiana Department of Corrections?
Correct.
What was the date, the next offense, what county was that?
Clark County, Indiana.
And what was the date of that offense?
April 24th, 2009.
And what was that offense?
2, 3, 4 counts of armed robbery, and 1 count of criminal confinement.
What was the date of the conviction?
February 1st, 2010.
Okay, so it looks like you sentenced both things on the same day.
Correct.
What was the sentence for this one?
12 years fixed term of imprisonment at the Indiana Department of Corrections with 6 years suspended upon strict terms of probation.
And did anything of note
Correct. He violated that probation on January 12th of 2014.
January 12th, you said?
Yes, 2014.
And when he violated the probation, what happened?
He was revoked on April 14th, 2015, and it was revoked 270 days and released with JTC of 135 actual days and ordered returned to original terms of probation.
What was the, oh, and are these misdemeanors or felonies?
These are felonies.
Was there another offense?
Correct. The next one is in Jefferson County, Kentucky. And that one, the offense date is August 6, 2013.
What was the charge for which he was convicted?
Assault, fourth degree domestic violence, minor injury.
Okay. What was the date of conviction?
August 19th, 2013.
And what was the sentence in that case?
He was sentenced to 193 days in jail, which 180 of those days were suspended. He was credit time served for 13 days and sentenced to 2 years supervised probation.
And is that a misdemeanor or a felony?
That is a misdemeanor.
Was his probation successful?
No, he violated once on April 17th, 2014, and again on December 17th, 2014.
What were those dates?
The first time was April 17th, 2014, and then again on December 17th, 2014.
What were the penalties for each of those?
The first time he was revoked on April 24th, 2014, he was sentenced to 90 days in jail, credit time served for 12 days. And the second time, it was the sentence date was June 3rd, 2016, and he was sentenced to 90 days in jail.
Is there another conviction?
Yes, the next one is from Clark County, Indiana.
What was the date of the offense?
January 12th, 2014.
And the offense?
2 counts of battery resulting in bodily injury.
What was the date of sentence?
July 16th, 2015.
What was the sentence?
He was jailed for he was sentenced to 1 year in jail, 6 months in jail, sentenced to run consecutive. Correct.
And does Indiana consider that a misdemeanor or a felony?
They consider those misdemeanors.
Was that probation successful?
No, he was violated on December 16th, 2015. Or excuse me, he violated on December 16th, 2015.
And was there a final conviction?
Not for that. That is still
No,
currently.
I'm sorry. I meant for an offense.
Oh, yes. The last one is Jefferson County,
What was the date of the offense?
April 13th, 2014.
What was the crime for which he was convicted?
Assault, fourth degree, domestic violence, minor injury.
And what was the date of the conviction?
He was convicted on April 24th, 2014.
What was the sentence like?
He was sentenced to 270 days in jail with 180 days suspended, credit time served 12 days, 2 years supervised probation.
And when he was probated, was that probation successful?
It was not. He had a violation on December 17th, 2014.
And was that the final conviction?
Yes, that was the final conviction.
Right. do you want me to move this?
Any questions from the defense?
So, in your role, how long did you have that?
A little over a year.
So you were asked to get records together and kind of collate them into a report, basically.
Correct.
And other than that, you don't have any other role in this
As in,
with Brice Rhodes.
correct.
I've got a further question.
Any follow-up?
No,
You're free to go, madam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commonwealth's next witness.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth calls Officer Christy Henley.
Thank you. Hello. I'll let you set your stuff down and then I'll have you raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Officer Henley. Have a seat.
Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Christy Henley. I am a probation and parole officer with the Kentucky Department of Corrections.
And as part of your duties with the Office of Probation and Parole, do you learn about the penalty ranges for different crimes and the system of parole and incarceration in Kentucky?
Yes, ma'am.
The defendant has been convicted of counts of intentional murder. Can you tell the jury what is the penalty range for murder?
The penalty range for murder can be 20 to 50 years, life without parole, or life without parole for 25 years.
Break these out. 20 to 50 years. Does that mean that the sentence could be 21, 42, any number in between 20 and 50?
Yes.
If somebody is sentenced to any of these besides life without parole, will they at some point meet the parole board?
Yes.
Okay, before we get to when that is, can you tell the jury what parole is?
Parole is a supervised early release from a prison sentence that is authorized by the state parole board.
And how does somebody get paroled? Do they go before the parole board?
They do.
Okay. What are some of the things that the parole board can consider?
The parole board, for appropriative release, is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. They will consider psychological evaluations, educational programs, the seriousness of the crime, whether it was violent, the criminal history, a juvenile record, institutional adjustment, history of drug and alcohol involvement, history of assaultive behavior, history of violence, and any pending charges.
And when somebody goes before the parole board, what are the different choices the parole board can make at that point?
There are 3 different choices. They can choose to parole them. They can choose a deferment, and then they can choose serve out.
What does serve out mean?
Serve out means that they will be required to serve until their minimum expiration date.
All right, so we'll go back to now what somebody's eligible for parole. Is murder a violent offense?
Yes.
What does that mean? Does that affect parole eligibility?
It does.
When somebody is convicted of a violent offense, when is that person eligible for parole?
They have to serve at least 85% of their sentence.
Until they meet the parole board?
Yes, ma'am.
So if somebody got a 20-year sentence, when would he be eligible to meet the parole board?
A 20-year sentence, they would be eligible to meet the parole board in 17 years.
And at that point, what you said before, the parole board could parole them, defer them, or just tell them they have to serve out?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What, 21 years, when would he meet the parole board?
21 years would be 17 years and 10 months.
Is there, well, what about 50 years?
50 years, 24 and up would be 20 years.
And why is that?
Statutory limits.
Okay, so does everyone, before we get to these two last ones, does everyone meet the parole board at 20 years if their sentence is 24 years?
Yes.
So 24 years is 20 years,
Mhm.
and 50 years is 20 years, and everybody knows. Are there two exceptions?
Yes.
And if somebody is sentenced to life without parole for 25 years, when do they meet the parole board?
After 25 years.
And if somebody is sentenced to life without parole, when do they?
They do not.
And you said something earlier when you were talking about the final choice a parole board can make is to serve somebody out.
Mhm.
And you said something about a max date.
Minimum date.
Minimum date. What does
Yeah.
that mean?
The minimum date is the date the offender will satisfy their sentence with good time credits.
Do good time credits apply to violent offenses?
Some of them, yes.
Okay. What is a good time credit?
A good time credit. Good time is just a general term for all the credits that an individual can receive.
So let's say somebody has a 20-year sentence, he goes before the parole board, they say, you got to serve out. How much time might these good time credits be?
Judge, I have checked. Can you-
Do you know if there are credits that could bring down well, I feel like this is really confusing. Sorry. Let's say somebody has a 20-year sentence.
Yes, ma'am.
Meets the parole board at 17 years. They serve him out. Does he continue to serve for 3 full years?
Yes, he will serve on parole supervision until his minimum expiration date.
I'm sorry, not parole supervision, and he has to serve out the rest of his sentence in prison.
Yes.
Okay, so are there credits that take off from the back end of that?
There can, but he won't. He will not go below 85% of his sentence.
So he'll serve at least 17 years?
Yes.
And may serve more depending on credits?
Yes.
Okay. If he is placed on parole for 20 to 50 years or life, and he isn't, or even life without parole for 25 years, and he is paroled, how long does somebody serve on parole?
He will serve on parole until his minimum expiration date.
And is that what you said earlier is the time of the sentence minus the credits?
Yes.
So when somebody is on parole, is he released out onto the streets?
Yes, they are supervised by probation and parole at that
And
point.
what sort of things do they do while they're on parole?
They have to follow several rules. We have a set of general conditions that we put them on. They will report to an officer on a regular basis. They maintain employment. They participate in counseling programs. They have to maintain a stable residence. No possession of firearms, no use of drugs. If they have any payments, they have to pay supervision fees, restitution. No new offenses.
And are these similar to the requirements of somebody who's on a probation caseload as well?
Yes.
If somebody is on parole and then violates the parole, what happens?
They will more than likely go, but either face a sanction or go back before the parole board.
Can they be revoked from the parole?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what the difference is between consecutive sentences and concurrent sentences?
Consecutive sentences run right at one after another, and concurrent, the sentence will run at the same time.
Okay, so if somebody has 3 counts of murder, can the jury run, and let's say they get 30 years on each count, can the jury run those all together for a total of 30 years currently?
Yes.
And can the jury also run those consecutively?
Yes.
Is there a cap on number of years?
70 years.
The defendant has also been convicted of tampering. What is the penalty range for that?
1 to 5 years.
And then abuse of a corpse, 2 counts. What is the penalty range for that?
That is up to 12 months.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you.
For the defense?
Afternoon.
I want to make sure that this is all clear to the jury. We talk about this sort of stuff all the time. This is what you, this is your bread and butter, right? Okay. But actually, some of this stuff is fairly confusing.
It is.
So I may even ask you the same question that she asked, but I'm not doing it to be confusing. I'm trying to make sure there isn't.
Okay.
The sentences that carry the most time that the jury has convicted Mr. Rhodes. Is count 1, 2, and 3. Those are all counts of murder.
Yes.
85%. I want to make sure this is clear to the jury. We're not talking about the 85% would only play in to what's called a term of years, right? That's this top.
Yes.
The prosecution was asking you about good time, right? But actually, with a violent offense, someone is not eligible for most of what we call good time. That's
Correct.
so there is not a concern, and the jury should not have a concern that a sentence, for example, of 30 years was actually a sentence that was whittled down by good time to some low number. If right, I mean, it doesn't go down. There's not some, we don't, in Kentucky with a violent offense, people don't walk out the door with a small percentage of their sentence.
No.
Also, because with movies, TV, and true crime podcasts, people get confused. In Kentucky, we don't have a system where 1 day counts for 2 or 1 month gets doubled or anything like
No.
that. Okay. So if somebody's serving a year, that's a day for day year.
Yes.
Okay. So make sure I'm asking you this question. Also, I wanted to clarify, you may have said it, but I didn't hear you say it. There's no possibility of probation at all, right? Okay. Because this is a violent offense, that's not something that anyone even talks about. So when we talk about these things, like 20, when the Commonwealth is asking about the 20 years parole eligibility, that's an actual 20 calendar years.
Yes.
Parole eligibility. Okay. Even if someone is eligible for parole in Kentucky, and you said this, but I just want to make sure this is clear. That doesn't mean you ever get it.
No, correct.
Being eligible for parole is never a guarantee in Kentucky that you will get parole.
Correct.
And you laid out the criteria and things that the parole board looks at. So is it fair to say that someone basically has to earn parole? They have to show the parole board
Correct.
that that parole will be appropriate? So if somebody does a bad job on those criteria that you laid out for us, they don't get parole.
Yeah, it'd be up to the parole board, but yeah.
So if someone went up after 20 calendar years for parole, they could be denied parole.
Correct.
And under some circumstances, the parole board might, if they've done very badly, if the parole board was very disappointed with them, then they might never see the parole board again. Did I hear you say that?
Correct.
Or the parole board, again, after 20 years, and I'm just using this one, might say, we'll see you again in 3 years or 5 years or some number. They would set a number. Does the parole board then tell people who are in prison, or does someone, it might not be the parole board, it might be a different employee of the Department of Corrections. Are people told what the expectations are and things like participating in programs, staying out of, so it's not a surprise.
No.
They know what is expected of them, so people have an opportunity to try and earn that, right? Or if they don't meet expectations, then it's their own fault.
Correct.
Inside of the prison, you talked about there are programs, and I know I'm not going to ask you specific programs, specific places, right? Because that wouldn't be fair. You probably don't know. But there are programs available.
Correct.
And the parole board evaluates whether people participated in them and how they did in them and things like that.
Correct.
There's also therapy and counseling, depending upon the needs of the individual.
Correct.
And if appropriate, medication will be administered by the Department of Corrections as well.
Correct.
The people who do this in the Department of Corrections are well-trained.
Correct.
They see lots of people, right?
Correct.
And they know what they're doing. Right.
I would like to agree. Yes,
Okay.
correct.
You can tell me if you don't know. And those professionals make decisions about, when we're talking about parole, for example, they make decisions about who should stay in and who should be released with some form of supervision. Right?
Yes, the parole board does.
Yes. And if someone is eventually, I mean, we're talking about large numbers here, if somebody is eventually released on supervision, then they're still not, they still have things they have to do.
Correct.
They have rules they have to follow.
Correct.
And you, people who work with you, follow up on them, right?
Correct.
You make sure that people are following the rules.
Correct.
they're not, then you bring it back to court.
Correct. Yeah, we put it back before the parole board.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Any redirect?
No.
All right, you're free to go. Thank you. Does Commonwealth have any other witnesses?
Your Honor, that concludes the Commonwealth's
All
portion
right.
of this case.
Thank you. We're gonna take a break. Although I do want to go ahead and tell you all, I don't think that we'll be here very late today. I expect for you to be out of here hopefully by 4. But right now, we're gonna take a 10-minute break. If you could just come back in front of the courtroom doors at 2, let's say 2:40.
Okay, 2:40. That would be 12:40 my time. So 13 minutes.
All right.
Maybe.
Yes. Do you need white noise? Okay. Oh, okay, thank you. Go ahead.
When at this time, the defense would review our motions from the first phase as to our motion for directed verdict and our renewed motion for directed verdict with additional for directed verdict as to the aggravating circumstance under KRS 532.025. I believe the aggravator code is 2A6, that the act or activity the Commonwealth has not presented any additional evidence as to the facts of those allegations and of those alleged.
It sounds like they're saying that that's the last witness for the state. I'd be surprised. I would think that they would want to hear from the family of the victims.
And it led to so I asked the court dismiss the case.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Response from the Commonwealth?
Your Honor, we as the court sitting now, this motion, Commonwealth has been on a lot of evidence about the intentional nature and fabricated of intentional murder, and the fact that this was presented and found for the jury to be concluded.
All right, I believe that the jury can consider the evidence they heard in the guilty, not guilty phase. And additionally, even during the penalty phase, there was one witness who talked about the boys. And then, of course, Mr. Jones testifying about Christopher Jones.
They just turn off the mic? Sounds like it. Well, the ultimate victims have been silenced forever. I was interested in hearing what they were saying. They muted them. Okay, let's see. We've got 10 more minutes. I'm just taking a look to see what we've got. Let's see. Okay, I wanted to play the video from detailing Ruby Frankie's the terms of her plea deal. So let's find that here. Okay.
Rewrite it. Grandma.
With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty.
Ruby Frankie has pled guilty in court to the abuse of her own children. Her plea agreement goes into detail about what she did to her kids, and it is horrifying. Also, what does this mean for a potential sentence?
Oh, let's see. We've had a couple of comments while I was on another tab. Hello, Lydia G. One of my favorite great aunts who taught me to tie my shoelaces was a Lydia. So fond memories of associated with that name. Yes, one of the boys I think was 15. The other I think was like a year older. Oh, it was 14 and 15. Okay. Welcome, Shine the Light. Yes, they were, and the other actors in the crime were all extremely young too. I think the oldest one that I remember hearing from in the uh, criminal determination of the charges. I think the oldest one was 18, and the others were only like 15, and they look so young now, and it's been 7 years. And the defense attorney was talking about, redemption and so forth, and I'm going, I don't see any redemption in this guy. Those young kids, I did see possibility for them to change their lives. So, yeah. Okay, let's go back to Ruby Frankie. This is going to be longer than our break. So, what the jury is doing now is they're determining what the penalty should be. And I think that they said the three options were 20 years before probation, 25 years before probation, or life without parole. And they were saying that they have to do 75% of the sentence before they're eligible for parole, but I was a little confused because they were talking about 17 years. Maybe that was for the 25-year one. And if they want to say, that he can be eligible for parole after, a 20-year period, but they're consecutive, I could live with that because then he's going to be too old to do much. But it needs to be consecutive. He can't get concurrent sentences, but he really deserves life. Life without parole. So, I understand that the rationale for having the possibility of parole is it gives them an incentive to behave better in prison, but I don't know. I don't really see I don't see him being a good boy. I mean, if he was going to be a good boy, he wouldn't have attacked a nurse when he was incarcerated awaiting trial. Yeah, various other violations that he's had, and he's been in on, criminal history. He's not going to change his ways. So, okay, we've only got like 4 minutes left. Let me take a quick look and see if there's anything shorter. Oh, I remember there is a news story. I think Nate Eaton or one of his associates from East Idaho News. Let me find that real quick. Okay, during, I think it was early in this case, we had Jeremy Driggs was on the run after his pregnant wife was found murdered. And earlier that day, he had been in some store and completely starkers, and he yeah, I don't know why they didn't take him in for a mental evaluation, because that's just not a normal thing to have somebody in jail. I mean, in a store, naked. So, they should have taken him in for a mental evaluation, but instead they let him go, and so he kills his pregnant wife, and he's missing along with his 10-month-old son. And I think the next day they found him naked in a sleeping bag by the side of the road, and they looked further and found his 10-month-old son dead. So the follow-up is written by Caitlin Hart from East Idaho News, and this is out of Driggs. It says, a man has been indicted for the alleged murder of his wife, her unborn baby, and their 10-month-old son. Just a note, I don't think it's alleged that they were murdered. I think they were murdered. It's alleged whether he's the guy who'd done it. Jeremy Best, 48, was indicted in the Teton County by a grand jury Monday on 3 counts of murder in the first degree and 3 enhancements for the use of a firearm or other deadly weapon during the commission of crime. Count 1 of the indictment states that Best killed Kaylee Randall by shooting her with a firearm and causing her death. Count 2 states that Best killed Randall's unborn baby by shooting Randall and causing her death, thereby causing the fetus death. Count 3 states that Best killed 10-month-old Zeke Best by inflicting an injury on Zeke Gregory's neck using a knife and thereby causing his death. It appears from the indictment that officials are unsure exactly when or where Zeke died. Grand jury proceedings are sealed, so there is no further detail available at this time. According to the joint press release from the Teton County Prosecutor Bailey Smith and Bonneville County Prosecutor Randy Neal, Best will be prosecuted in Teton County, even though Zeke Best was found dead in Bonneville County. Under the circumstances of this case, Idaho law allows Best to be prosecuted in Teton County for all 3 murders, even though one of the victims is found in Bonneville County, states the release. Just a note, that makes sense because you can't separate the 2 crimes, and so it would it'd be kind of ridiculous to have two trials in two different counties with rulings that may be inconsistent with each other on various points of law. Okay, during his initial appearance on December 4th, Magistrate Judge Jason Walker ordered a mental competency evaluation for Best, which has still not been completed. All of the court hearings are currently on hold until that evaluation is complete. On the night of November 30th, a deputy within Teton County Sheriff's Office was dispatched to 4600 Skyline Loop in Victor for a report of a 911 hang-up call, according to the court documents. Dispatch told the deputy that there were loud shouts of yelling in the background of the phone call and then silence. After further review of the 911 call recording before a dispatcher answers the call, a woman can be reportedly be heard repeating Jeremy and Jeremy no, according to the police report. A male voice then repeats yes and then yells, "Get the F back, you're gonna get shot," before saying, "I love you, I love you, I love you." A deputy arrived at the house and spoke to a neighbor who said he was in bed when he heard a man and a woman fighting across the street. He identified Jeremy and Kaylee as the house's residents, saying they had a 7 to 8-month-old child. The neighbor reportedly heard Kaylee yelling, "Jeremy, stop it, you have a baby," before hearing about 5 gunshots that sounded like they came from outside. Deputy walked around the driveway where he located an unresponsive woman, Kaylee, laying on her side on the ground under the lean-to of the east side of the north shop. He reportedly noticed a large pool of blood underneath and around her body, which was lying next to the open door of the shop. According to the court documents, the body had what appeared to be multiple gunshot wounds in the area of her right breast and right side. Deputy rolled the body over and attempted CPR but was unsuccessful. Police reports said the body was recently deceased as the body was still malleable and not rigid at all. The neighbor later confirmed that he saw a black Chevrolet Tahoe leave the house. Deputies confirmed Kaylee was the registered owner of a 1995 black Chevy Tahoe with license plate 1T39349, registered to the same house's address. Deputies also found a white Chevrolet, which Best is said to have been driving at 11:56 a.m. that same day, when Bonneville deputies responded to a call at Swan Valley, where Jeremy appeared unclothed in the Swan Valley General Store, according to documents. A video of the incident sent to East Idaho News shows a fully naked Best slouching on the store's counter next to the cash register and grabbing a cigarette before being escorted outside the building by several people. He was evaluated by EMS on the scene and taken to Eastern Idaho Regional Medical Center by ambulance, according to the news release. The deputy followed the ambulance, and Best was turned over to the hospital staff for further medical and mental concerns. It's not clear what happened at the hospital, but EIRMC spokeswoman Colleen Neiman confirms Best was discharged that same afternoon. Teton County coroner was able to confirm with Kaylee's OBGYN that she was 28 weeks pregnant as of the day she died. 28 weeks would be a viable fetus, requiring time in the NICU unit. On December 2nd, a group of hunters called Bonneville County Dispatch saying they found a naked man on a sleeping bag on the side of the road, according to a news release Oops. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, I got distracted by something. I thought the hearing was over, but no. Collier was naked and making odd statements. Montebello County Sheriff's deputy responded to the area, which was on Kep's Crossing Road near Dan Creek Road, east of Idaho Falls. After making contact with the hunters, deputies identified the man as Best. Black Chevy SUV Best had been driving was found nearby. Deputies also located Zeke Best, who was dead. It's still unclear if Zeke's body was in the SUV. Then if you know someone who is dealing with domestic violence, please call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So, okay, let's see. We are 7 minutes late coming back from the 10-minute or the 13-minute break, which I'm not surprised by because that seems to be how this court operates. Let's check if there's anything else interesting. Let's see, it looks like they had the funeral for Sandra Day O'Connor, the retired late Supreme Court Justice. I'd seen a flag at half staff and was trying to remember who it was who had died. So that answers that.
We good to bring Jerry in? Okay. I don't know. Remember that case where it was the people in St. Matthews arguing about that right of way, and one neighbor was like, "But shit on our way." It's like, "You should allow their pets to go with them." Like off the silly stuff. Thank you. You can all be seated, thanks. For Mr. Rhodes' defense, would you like to call witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense would call Anna James.
Thank you. Hi, you can actually come right up here to the witness stand. Thank you. And I will have you raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth? All right, you can have a seat. Thank you. Is it James, James? Thanks.
Good afternoon.
I know I've just said your name, but if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Anna James.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, most recently, I've been in the mental health field for 28 years. Most recently, my position for 11 and a half years was assistant mental health coordinator for the largest Head Start grantee in the state of Indiana.
And what is your relationship to Brice?
I am Brice's stepmother.
When did you first meet Brice? When did you first come into his life?
In 1998.
And how old was Brice at that time?
7.
And when you met him, how much time did you spend with him?
We spent a lot of time together.
And how often would he stay with you?
Well, he would, I had a young son too. And then his brother Brice's brother Chandler was also there. So it got to be almost every weekend. But then he participated in sports. So I would be at his sports, his football games, and just around a lot.
And that was, I believe how old did you say he was?
He was 7.
And then were there any other periods of time in his life when you were seeing him more regularly?
So so then his father, and that was the beginning. So I started dating Sean. Actually, Sean and I worked together at Charter Hospital.
And Sean
is Brice's father. And so we started dating in 98. We introduced our boys. We got more serious in that first year. And then we moved together in 1999. And Brice.
What period of time that you spent with Brice would you say contained the best memories of Brice?
Those early years. So, and when he was little, and he and Chandler and Credence playing together, and Darion, which was another brother that he lived in Lexington when he would come and visit, and holidays, and our first family vacation was we went to Florida to the beach, and we stayed on the beach, and went to Disney World, and it was just fun, age appropriate fun, and we were away, and it was a vacation, and I taught Brice how to swim on that vacation.
Did you take any pictures during that vacation?
Yes, took a lot of pictures. Vacation.
Is this a photograph that you took yourself?
Yes, that is a photograph that I took.
And who are we looking at in this photo?
So this is Brice and my son Credence. And you'll notice in this picture, Credence has a big cut chunk out of the front of his hair because he looked up to Brice a lot. And Brice had gotten a Nike swoosh cut in the back of his hair, and Credence wanted a Nike swoosh sign like Brice. So that was his attempt at a Nike swoosh sign there. So we look at these pictures and laugh about that often, remembering that.
And was this a photograph that you took as well?
No, it was. It was Disney World. And that is Brice, Credence, Brice, and Chandler from left to right. And Jeannie.
And what about this photo?
And that again is Disney World. That was at MGM Studio at the Muppet Show. We had our 3D glasses on.
And who's in this photo?
That's me and Brice and Chandler and Credence.
Okay, let's go back to the swimming for a moment. We can turn the lights back on for a minute. Thank you. I think you told us that you taught Brice to swim. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that was like?
So, and it was really important, for us and considering, that we had young children and blending the family, and there was other, parents involved. And one thing I noticed early on with Brice is that, trust and him trusting me was really important. And, I worked really, really hard at that. And also with Brice, he didn't like to be embarrassed. He didn't like to do anything that would put him in a situation where he would be embarrassed or where he didn't have control or, and so the swimming piece was big, and it stands out for me because it was so big because he had trust was a big thing too. And so in my family, it was always really important to learn how to swim, to at least to know how to float, to be able to, if you fell in, to be able to save yourself. And so that was important that for me that the boys knew how to do that. And so that was, Brice didn't know how to swim. And so I taught him how to, I say swim, but it was more floating. And so, teaching him how to float and trusting the water and trusting that the water would hold him up. And I mean, that was a very significant moment in the building of our connection and our relationship, was teaching him how to swim and that he trusted me. And that was. You learn how to swim.
Is there anything else from that vacation, that family vacation, that stands out or that's significant to you?
Just Brice's goofiness. He was always so goofy when he was, when he was little. And one of the Star Wars came out, and when we went to Disney, the boys, one of the shows we went to, they got lightsabers there. And so then we went to see Star Wars after that. And he, when we got back, he always liked to play pretend too. And he and his brother, not just him, but he and his brothers. And so we had the arms of the couch had covers on them, and Brice thought they looked like what the stormtroopers wore. So, and the other thing I remember is like the boys were in their underwear a lot. So I have all these pictures of them in their underwear with these couch things on their head and their lightsabers, like running around and it was just remembering that we were just happy and they were happy, and it was just a really nice time to be together as a family.
Thank you. I think we have a few more pictures. Could you describe this photo for us, please?
So that was after Christmas. Credence, and that's Credence and Brice. And that was it. Yeah, them singing something for me and Brice playing the guitar. Credence continues to be a musician to this day, but yeah, which I think is funny. But again, Brice was so goofy. He was such a goofy. He was always like making jokes, and that they were really getting into this song. I don't recall what the song was, but they were really getting into it.
What about this next photo?
And that was a family vacation to Memphis. We drove to, we meet my cousin. It was Memphis was a halfway point for us. And so my cousin and her son met us there. And Brice, when we were on Bill Street, he saw that hat and wanted that hat, and he loved that hat, and he wore it like the whole time. We were at Hard Rock Cafe in this picture. But Brice had a little afro, and so the funny thing, he wore that hat the whole time, like from when he woke up until like the only time he didn't wear it is when we were swimming. But when he would take that hat off, he had wore it so long that his hair was shaped in the form of that silly hat. that he loved so much. Yeah, but that was a good family trip too.
What about this photo?
So that is Brice and his brothers. That is Credence and Brice and Chandler and Darion. And that is in one of our rooms at our house. And that was, yeah,
Was that a chair that they all like to sit on quite a lot?
yes, that was a chair that we sit in. It rocked. And so, yeah, there was a lot of,
Was it normal for Brice to pull a goofy face in a photo?
it is normal. It was normal for Brice to pull goofy faces in, yeah, because he was a goofy boy.
What about this photo?
So, this was, it was, yeah, that was at my apartment. That's before we moved in. That's when the boys were supposed to be sleeping. You see, Chandler was always very obedient. I don't think he was really sleeping, but he knew to fake it. And I think I came in to say, well, you guys are supposed to be asleep. And two, this was Credence's bedroom. Credence had bunk beds. He had 2 beds, but whenever they spent the night, they all slept in the same bed always.
What about this one?
That's Brice and his sister Chambrielle.
Is this a school photo or a family photo?
I think that is a photo that his mom had taken.
What about this one? I think you took this one.
Yes, that's one that I had taken of the boys. I think that's the first picture I had of them taken together.
How old is Brice, do you think, in this?
That
photo?
was 99, 7, 8.
I think we have 2 more. I think it's okay. We can- I think we can move on. It's okay. And what about the last one?
The grandson. That's Brice and his son, Joel. My grandson.
I know you were part of his grandson's life.
I am very actively involved in his life. Yes.
We don't have any other photos. Are there any other memories from Florida or from when Brice was in the 3rd grade that you'd like to share? What would you do with the boys?
Well, I was a busy mom, so just making sure they, got to practices. And so Brice, when I moved in with Sean initially in 99, his oldest boys, Brice and Chandler, didn't live with him. They lived in the area, but they didn't live with him. And, I was a recent college grad. I, was a sociology major. I had, I worked in the field, and there were some red flags that I saw with both the boys and their living situation. And, and I had this grand idea, not just me, but Sean too, just wanted to stabilize things for the boys. And we were moving towards, marriage and long term. And, and so I felt it would be important to bring the boys into our home to go to school. I worked at a community mental health center on the school.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you want to speak up some.
Sure. Do I need to scoop? Is this the mic?
That would be helpful as well, yes.
I worked on a school-based team in a community mental health center in Jeffersonville. And I just thought it would be we thought it would be a good idea to have them in the home and to be in a school that I could, that I was I was involved in. And so we met with Bryce's mom and his grandmother, and I had expressed to her at that time, and because I knew that there was, I let her know what my concerns were. I felt like, I knew that there was some abuse in her relationship, and that I wanted, that we just wanted to provide more stability, and we wanted the boys to be together. And so Shauna agreed to let Brice come and live with us for his third grade year. And so he did live with us.
I'm
for-
so sorry. I'm still having a hard time
Oh, I'm
hearing you.
And that's probably my fault. I started talking softly, so let's just try and speak so everyone can hear.
Okay.
And I'll probably ask you about a number of things that you've just shared with us.
Okay.
I think, can you tell us about your participation in Brice's education?
And so, the normal kind of things. I was probably a little bit more actively involved because I was at the school pretty often, and in communication with his teachers about the progress that he was making, and there were some concerns that came up, and we wanted to get him tested, and Shauna refused to have him tested at that.
I'm sorry. When you say tested, what do you mean?
So to have testing for a developmental, or academic, evaluated, an evaluation through the
And
school.
what stood out to you that made you want him to be evaluated?
So the processing of information, the retention of information, just some cognitive things, as far as understanding.
Would you help Brice with his homework?
I would.
And what was that like?
It was challenging in that there were, so going back to what I had said earlier about Brice didn't like to be embarrassed or feel, like he didn't have control of the situation, or, understand things. So I had to think of, ways to help support him without making him, without him feeling embarrassed. And so there would be often, he would, so there oftentimes I would help him as much as I could, but then we would get to a place where, it wasn't helpful anymore. And so that's when I would talk to his teachers about, this is as far as we were able to get. We did read a lot. He didn't like reading. And so I read to him, and the other boys. So we would do that, nightly. We read Harry Potter and chapter books and things, and that helped him as far as with the reading piece.
Did Brice, I think you said he did some sports at school.
It was youth league, so he was, at that time it was youth league, and it was youth league football.
And did Brice play football later in life as well?
I am not certain. I don't think he played football later. I know that he played basketball when he was in middle school, but I don't think he played football beyond youth league that I'm aware of. We moved away in 2002, and that changed our accessibility and our interactions.
I'm sorry, changed what?
It changed our accessibility to Brice then, and when we moved away.
Did Brice ever get evaluated or tested?
He did get evaluated.
When did that happen?
I am not for certain. I believe it was middle school when the actual testing took place.
And why did it take so long for that to occur?
Because his mother had to agree to that and sign off on it. And that's-
Was it just school that Brice struggled with? How did he do at home with chores or tasks?
So he was task avoidant, and and chores weren't and some, again, trying to determine what's age appropriate and not age appropriate. He tried to get out of chores a lot. It wasn't his favorite thing to do, and often would engage in goofy behavior to get out of doing things. So there wasn't a lot of follow through, and again, he was pretty task avoidant. And so
Why do you
when
think he was so task avoidant?
I think, and then sometimes too, it seemed like, when I gave him directives, or when his father gave him directives, the processing piece that I spoke about, he, I don't know that he processed that the whole way through. And so it would look like he was being oppositional, and he wasn't being, it wasn't. So that sometimes that would lead to problems, in consequences. And, but I think it was again about processing and understanding.
Did you ever observe Brice develop a morning routine or any routines or habits of any type on his own?
Not on his own, not on his own. He was, was pretty dependent on, me or his brother to like wake up and those type of things. He was still pretty young.
Did Brice ever have a job with you at any point that he was with you?
And so when we like I said, we moved away in 2002, and he came to live with us when he was in middle school, and for a short time. And we were looking at some different alternatives to support him and to get him acclimated into the community. And we did look at a job at Marsh at the supermarket, but that never. I mean, we spoke with the manager and we went in, but he never did.
How did that interview go? Do you remember?
So it was an unofficial interview, and it was, but Brice looked to me more to do the talking for him.
And how old was he at the time?
Probably 14.
I want to go back to talk about one of the other boys that you raised. You raised 3 boys during,
Yes.
3 or 4.
Yes.
During the same period of time.
Yes.
Was Brice the only one who had struggles at school?
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. And that was the reason why. So Chandler was the other. He and Brice are a year apart, and they're both Sean's children. And he was struggling and having some outbursts in school, just as Brice was struggling. And that was one of the reasons why Sean and I wanted them to come and live with us. We were moving towards, we were more serious. I had recently graduated from college. We had, we were trying to create stability. We wanted the boys together. And so we brought Chandler. Yeah, so Chandler came to live with us too.
Were you able to help Chandler find success or find support in school?
Yes, we were able to create that stability that we wanted, and that we wanted to create for him. And and Chandler stayed with us, and he moved with us. And yes, Chandler completed his PhD in June of he completed his PhD in June of this year. And he currently is an assistant professor of political science.
how do you feel that that consistency impacted Chandler?
I feel like it impacted him positively, you know, and it impact, I mean, his life trajectory was completely different. And he was able to thrive. He worked on he was able to thrive in a, yeah, just remarkable way. He had success in elementary and middle, and then high school. He graduated in the top 20 from his high school. He went on to um, one of the most prestigious colleges in the University of Chicago. He worked on Capitol Hill for a while after he graduated with his undergraduate degree. He went back and got his master's and his PhD, and he is currently an assistant professor at the University of Oregon.
What about Brice? You've told us that you tried to get him tested. What else did you do to try to help Brice?
So we went, when Brice came to stay with us in the 3rd grade, I spoke about the meeting with Brice's mother, and I understood kind of, you know, when I think back about it, because think back to it, I was really young, and so Sean, we were both really young. We were all, you know, the parents in the situation were all very young, but I understood the importance of including his mother and respecting his mother and validating, you know, where she was, and that, you know, in that partnership, in trying to raise Brice, it was going to be really important that we had a good relationship. And so, you know, I was aware of, you know, it was just very guarded. We never knew where she lived. There was a lot of different phone numbers. She always had a lot of money, but no job that I was aware of, drove really nice cars. And so just, again, a lot of red flags for, you know, just some, and then, you know, Brice's behavior, his guardedness, him being scared. He often, I didn't mention before, like when he would stay over, he often wanted to sleep in my bed at night. One night he fell asleep with a big gob of gum in his mouth and woke up and he had a lot of hair and had all this gum in his, we took a long time to get the gum out of the afro, but so again, it was just really important. I knew so that I needed to, that mom was in an abusive relationship. And so having, you know, that conversation with her and, you know, us getting on the same page. And so initially she agreed to allow him to come and live with us. And he stayed with us. And Sean and I weren't married. And so also too, I respected that I was not the wife in the situation. I was the girlfriend. And, you know, so I respected those boundaries and was very intentional about respecting those boundaries. And then we got married on January 1st of 2000. And I was at a place where I had been pushing Sean to get some kind of custody, to get something on paper because of, because I felt like Shauna, Brice's mother, with her lifestyle, was sabotaging our ability to provide the stability in his life that we wanted and we needed to have. We didn't have phone numbers. We didn't know where Brice was when she would take him on the weekend. Sometimes she would take him to school on Monday. Sometimes she wouldn't. He would be late to school from time to time. And so after we got married, I began to push more. And I began to exert more. You know, we need to go to court. You need to get some kind of something on paper so you have more rights in Brice's life. And when I started to do that, that created friction and tension between Shauna and I, and she tried to come and get Brice. And so we had talked with an attorney. We were seeking custody, seeking some kind of, and so it was led into a weekend where we kept Brice until we could get to court. And on that Monday morning, the school called me, the secretary, because again, I was very involved, and the secretary called me and said, Anna, there's a woman here saying that she is, Brice's mother, and she's trying to take him out of school. And she said, and if you bring Brice to school, she's going to be able to sign him out. And so we had all this stuff going on, and so we decided to keep Brice. She said, just if you don't bring him, then she can't get him. So I kept Brice at home, and it was a very emotional situation. It was a very emotional. Brice's mother and grandmother came over, and Brice was, in the house, and he was crying, and they were banging on the doors and the windows and come out here, Brice, come out here. And I, explained to Brice, this is, we're trying to protect you. We need to know where you're at on the weekends. We need to have phone numbers and addresses. And I said, I'm so sorry this is happening. And I said, but you tell me, what do you want, Brice? What do you want? And he said, I just want to be with you guys. I just want to stay with you guys. And I said, well, we're going to fight to keep you here. And I'm sorry you have to go through that. But he hid in that bedroom, and he wouldn't go out. And his mom and grandma were saying, come out, Brice, get out here, get out here. And but that was the hardest memory. I remember I couldn't protect him. So I protected him in that moment, but then just as soon as he went back to school, she came and got him, and we went to court, and we didn't get, it wasn't favorable for us. And after that, Shauna enrolled him at a different school, and we weren't able to have the same level of contact with him that we had been before, that we were able to before.
Was there anything else that was different after the custody battle?
Yeah, so Brice was different. He was different. Our interactions and our connections, we've always been connected. We are still connected. I love Brice forever. But his guardedness, he was more guarded. It was just like we started all over again.
Was that how Brice was the first time you met him?
So that was how Brice was kind of, he was always, kind of guarded in the beginning. And it took a while, like I said, to develop that trust and that connection. And I was very intentional. It was really important for me. And then too, like, I was just hopeful, I was young and optimistic. And I think I loved the boys before I loved Sean. I loved his boys.
I'm gonna pause for just one moment. Can I see this attorneys?
We've talked about your best memories of Brice from the third grade and a very difficult memory of the custody battle. Are there any other difficult memories that you have of Brice that you'd like to share with us?
Yes. So we always would do whatever, and we were clear with Shauna. We would always do whatever we could to help stabilize Brice's life and his situation. We knew, and again, I still don't know all the details. I don't know all the details of what Shauna was involved in. But I know there was trauma. I know there was abuse. I know, but it took a while, and, Brice was getting into trouble, and Shauna called Sean and said, I need Brice to come and stay with you all. Is that, and we talked about it and said, absolutely, absolutely, he can come and stay with us. That's when he was in middle school, and he came, and he stayed with us, and that was, when the job and, trying, and Chandler was there. And so, Chandler worked, really wanted him to be there and really, loved that he was going to school with them and Credence. Um, but it was hard for Brice to acclimate. It was hard for, and it was different. They were older, and he and Brice had done some things and got in trouble, and he was really mad at Sean, and there kind of how the whole situation ended is that Brice hurt himself. He did some self-injury. I don't know exactly what it was, but he had marks on his face and called the cops and said it was Sean, and and he had to be. They took him to the Eskenazi, which was the local hospital, and we had to go through all that and then go to get him, and when they realized what that it wasn't that there wasn't any kind of abuse or anything going on, and we went to the hospital and um to get Brice, and when I got there he was um in the hospital bed, and I was still like frustrated and just all kinds of emotions. And I remember, and Brice he never disrespected me. That was one thing throughout he was, he was goofy and he wouldn't always follow directions and things, but we had a very loving relationship. We still have a loving relationship. And so uh, I don't remember my exact words, but I said, something like, what, Brice, what is, going on? And he looked at me and he said, get out of my face. And it was just like a whole different, you know, I'd never seen that in him. He sounded different, and it was, yeah. So it was, that was, I mean, I can still hear his voice in my head saying that. And I remember it was scary. It was I was hurtful. It made me sad. It was just, there was, yeah. Um, and that was a hard, and it's a difficult memory. And decided after that, Brice wanted to go back to his mother's. He wanted to come back to Jeffersonville. And we arranged that. I took him back down to his mom's, and it's a pretty quiet ride back down there. It was a pretty quiet ride back to his mom's. And when he was getting out, his mom came to the window. I was talking to her, and he looked at me and he said, I love you. And I said, I love you too, Brice.
How did you feel when Brice said he loved you after all of that?
I mean, I felt like a mom feels when they're, going through a really hard situation with their child, when they look at you and they say, I love you. I mean, there were still all the emotions, because we were still dealing with a lot of stuff, not knowing, like what the next steps were and things. But I felt love for him too. And I felt concern, and I felt it just, I always wanted to help him. I always wanted to do whatever I could. But again, kind of that helpless feeling that I had felt like that was, um, throughout our relationship, is that my hands were tied a whole lot in helping Brice, and that was always hard for me.
If Brice is given an opportunity for parole, what would you like your role to be in his life going forward?
So I would like to still always have a relationship with Brice. I feel like, ongoing mental health support is really important for him. Ultimately, that's his choice, what he follows through with, but, you know, I, I've been in the mental health field for 28 years and, I have a lot of resources. And so I would, like to encourage that. I can see that I wouldn't, if in that relationship, that would be something that I would encourage. And, and Brice, like I said, I'm his, his son's Nina is what he calls me, Nina. Um, so, I play that, I would continue to play that active role in being the grandmother and, and yeah.
Thank you. I have no more questions.
Any questions? All right, you're free to step down. Thank you. Does the defense have any other witnesses to call today? Okay. If you want to come up, I'll just double check with you before we let the jury go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go ahead and break. We think tomorrow will be the last day that you'll need to be here likely. But we're going to start up at 9 o'clock tomorrow so we can try to, not have you here late if at all possible. So we will ask you to be outside the courtroom doors tomorrow morning, no later than 9. In the meantime, you are still under the admonition of not discussing, researching, or posting about the case. We'll see you tomorrow.
All rise for the jury.
Did she say 9? That's that's early. Let's just go back and double check that.
Not have you here late if at all possible. So we will ask you to be outside the courtroom doors tomorrow morning, no later than 9. In the meantime, you are still under the admin.
Okay, 9. So that's 7 a.m. for me. Okay, I need to be a good girl and not stay up too late tonight. I didn't catch him smiling when looking at the early family photos, but it's nice to know that something affects him positively. Um, um, it's just a shame that she couldn't have been more of a presence in his life because it sounds like she was a good influence. Anyway, so tomorrow's the last day, and I need to get working on getting my SUV emptied out so that I can go up to Idaho for Christmas. It's going to be fun. I always love to spend the holidays with my nieces and nephews, so it's always a great treat for me. So, hi, Matt. Well, yes, we are in everybody. I wish everybody good luck with getting your last minute holiday preparations done. And so, I think I'll probably take a short nap. And the 28th of this month, wow, that's I'm sorry, but I think that that's just wrong to tear down the house before the trial. I just think back to the Jeffrey McDonald murders and how he got off on his military hearing, but and his stepfather his father-in-law was extremely supportive of him throughout that, and then he kind of was a little put off by some things that he did post military hearing, and he had a background in the military and investigation and so forth, and so he asked the CID to allow him to go to the crime scene to check out some things to kind of get a better feeling for what happened. And um, he retraced the steps and everything that McDonald said that he took during the 911 call and so forth, and it looked at the lighting conditions and so forth, and the fact that there were undisturbed greeting cards up on top of the shelf, and there's supposed to be a life and death um, struggle in the living room with at least four people there, and the Christmas or the greeting cards not even getting knocked over. He realized that it was all a tissue of lies, and that his son-in-law did it. So that was invaluable for him to be able to see that, and later the jury went on a trip to the apartment to view it for themselves. And it was only after years and years of litigation post-trial that they tore down the apartment building. So um, to me, it's a big mistake, because yes, they can do measurements using computers and so forth so that they can have a digital recreation, but there's nothing like being there in the space. And Don B had a post on his community tab about what is, since the place has been cleaned up and the stuff has been removed, would it really make any difference? And I say yes, because they can still get a feeling for the line of sight, the angles, logistics, that in a way that you can't from a computer simulation. So extremely important to me that they have access to the crime scene, and that was one thing that was so important with the Murdaugh case, was the jury going to see the kennel. And so I'm hoping that maybe there will be some last minute injunction that will halt the demolition, because I just think that it's a big mistake. I think that they're just rushing to try to pretend that nothing ever happened. And I'm sorry, the victims in the case deserve justice, and that involves having all the evidence available to the jury that will one day hear this, and a big part of it is the crime scene. So anyway, thank you all for joining me today, and please have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow. And I'm going to set my alarm right now so that I don't forget. Yes, today I set the alarm, but I set it for the wrong time and I woke up a half hour earlier than I needed to. Okay, 6. I have a healthy supply of Diet Dew on hand, so I don't have to get up early to run to the store. So the alarm is set, and we'll see you tomorrow. We'll have a great day. Bye-bye.